Very rarely do I get exactly what I expect from a game. Almost 7 years to the day, I got to play a game that was everything I was promised right from the first time I booted it up, something that oh so rarely happens nowadays. It seems only massive names like Rockstar can consistently release all-time projects that simply work the day they come out with any regularity. But one little studio in Prague has managed this feat not once, but twice, grabbing my attention with YouTube videos and dev blogs, making me believe in a project, and then nailing it. They did it once with Kingdom Come Deliverance, and now with the sequel, they proved that their first attempt was no fluke, there were no accidents. This is easily one of the greatest sophomore efforts in the history of gaming as a whole. I won't beat around the bush too long, but suffice it to say that KCD 2 lives up to every positive expectation put on it. It shouldn't be heard about, watched, nor discussed, it should be played. I won't spoil any part of the story here because it should be experienced firsthand, and to learn anything about it before seeing it with your own eyes would be a tragedy. Let's not waste any time, let's just get into it. I'm Purple, and this is Kingdom Come Deliverance 2, in review.
Dentes Fortuna Juvat!
Right off the bat, KCD was known for its phenomenal combat system, and that has been revamped for the sequel to make it both, I think, easier for new players to comprehend, but provided more depth for veterans, even if it took me a little while to see it. When I first touched the combat, it felt a little clunky and slow, along with feeling like it had been dumbed down, but I just simply didn't understand it yet. To put it plainly, skill issue. In the first game, you would learn the basics of blocking and attacking, trying to force an opening with feints or dodges, but once you learned the Master Strike, that was kind of just it. In one training session, you would essentially master one-on-one combat with a simple button press being all you needed to counter and damage your foes. Now that's not to say that the gameplay became a breeze. Getting jumped by multiple people could still become a death sentence quickly, and mistakes were always punished harshly no matter how good you were. And there was this charm to the gameplay in the first game, as you could get really cocky and try to get fancy with it only to get your head bashed in by literal villagers with sticks. The second game has completely revamped this system, allowing you the same level of mastery in one-on-one fights, but forcing you to be better to do so, and making Master Strikes harder to pull off, especially in group fights, making them feel far more rewarding. The combat system is essentially the same, with combat being an ebb and flow of blocking and attacking, but unlike in the first game, your ability to counterattack feels much more natural, being a bigger part of combat, as a perfect block will now allow you the opportunity to fire back immediately, but without a guarantee of landing a hit. It's very easy to find yourself in a rhythm where both you and your opponent seem to block everything coming their way. This leads to really exciting exchanges where being skillful and willing to take risks can push you over the edge in a fight or land you in deep water. Even with the best armor in the game, you can take damage fast and quickly find yourself in a battle you can't win. That being said, fighting multiple enemies has somehow lost the feeling of danger from the first game. The AI seem more willing to give you a fair fight by standing within your eye line rather than always working to your back. I understand that for new player retention, you probably don't want them going through the frustration of always having someone hitting you in the back of the head, and truth be told, I think that since there's an increased difficulty of individual fights, it makes up for it. That being said, in large groups, it's definitely still possible to get overwhelmed, with 1 mil coming to mind, although it doesn't happen very often in the main story. What the main story does do, however, is put you in spectacular cinematic battles over and over again. We were on the outside walls of a siege in the first game, but now in the sequel, we'll also experience the chaos of trying to keep the enemy out of the gates. Firing down on advancing troops with the new crossbow the game has, which can be nerve-wracking trying to reload in the face of a never-ending advance of enemies. We can also stem the tide by using a polearm to push ladders off the walls or drop rocks on enemies trying to batter down the gates. The battles quickly descend into chaos, especially if you allow the enemies to get a foothold, and the visuals of you and your comrades becoming drenched in blood and gore really add to the immersion. From large-scale battles to skirmishes on the roads or honorable duels, the combat is fantastic through and through, both honoring and expanding on the original. There's more to do outside of combat, however, with the new blacksmith mechanic being one that's been talked about a lot. I have to say that while I like it, it doesn't feel impactful enough. There's not a great difference between the weapons in the game, often going simply from good, better, best. And an honest day's work doesn't pay any better in this game than in real life. Also, hammering horseshoes shouldn't be harder than building a longsword, but for some reason it really is. The side content is as fantastic as the first game, with an absolutely vast world to explore that feels endless. The new crime and punishment system is also far more improved, with genuine long-lasting effects that will follow you for most of the game. I got branded very early doing a favor for someone, and I despise seeing it throughout the playthrough. Even after the effects had faded and people would speak to me again, that ever-existing mark would haunt me, necessitating another playthrough. With that, let's get back into a quick non-spoiler review of the story. I'll likely make a full breakdown of this game in the future, but it's far too early to be spoiling the game right now. The story will pick up right where it left off after the first game, riding to deliver the letter to von Bergov and Trotsky. In such a war-torn land, however, tragedy was always going to be just around the corner, and things will go wrong right from the start, setting us back to square one in a foreign and hostile land. The story isn't perfect, with some moments that bother me, and for an entry with the most dialogue in any game in history, there's a lot of things that I would have liked to have said that were not presented as options. Perfection is never the expectation, however, and the strengths far outweigh the faults. This game has decisions that have far more impact than I would have ever predicted, with seemingly small choices having, at times, devastating results, where you can be right and wrong at the same time. Trying to figure out what the right thing is when you're put on the spot gets harder and harder as the game goes on, especially as the weight of former decisions will weigh you down. The story is a web of lies and conflicted allegiances that a simple blacksmith's son will have to try and navigate. It's possible you'll fail as often as you succeed, with no other choice but to carry on and simply try to do better next time. You're constantly reminded that Warhorse didn't want this to feel like a video game. You can be the hero, but you can't come out unscathed. War is hell, and they will remind you over and over again until you learn that lesson. You can be a truly heinous person over the course of the main story, or you can be a paragon. And truth be told, both of them feel equally as valid for Henry. He's gone through tragedy after tragedy during this war he was dragged into, and it's not surprising that it might shape him into something harder and more violent. But it's all happening fast, so he could just as well fight to maintain his innocence. Overall, it's a brutal story that will give us resolutions to the questions left from the original game. Not always in the most satisfying way, but always in the right way. Warhorse have said that this game will be the end of Henry's story, but to be honest, at the end I couldn't help but feel there was still so much left to do. The end of this journey just feels like the beginning of another, and I find myself craving more, but with a full year of DLC on the way, I suppose I'll just have to wait. All in all, this game is everything I hoped for and more, making everything from the first game bigger and better, sanding off rough edges without ever doing anything that could be seen as damaging to the game's original vision. This game will become the yardstick against which we will measure other games. How often do games of this size come out and just work day one? Ubisoft can't do it, Bethesda can't do it, but this little Czech studio can? I not only get an equally high and far more consistent frame rate in this game than I got in the first entry, one that's 7 years old by the way. Having this increase in graphical fidelity without losing out on performance is unheard of. This game runs better than Star Wars Outlaws, a game with more money behind it than God, and it's less buggy than anything Bethesda has ever released, and that's a studio that have been doing this stuff since before some of you were born. To have a narrative this strong with gameplay this good with a game at this scale is frankly damn near impossible, and I can't believe they pulled it off, and all for $60. I can't express what a remarkable achievement this game is, and that goes for everyone involved. Writers, devs, actors, anyone and everyone who had anything to do with it. You wonderful people at Warhorse Studios have stood tall amongst your peers and challenged them to do better. Titles like this are going to be the ones we point to when we talk about how great games can be. That while some games will always be successful, and some franchises will always be popular, few will ever be honored the way I and so many others will honor this game, by declaring it a masterpiece. Well, that's it. There's nothing more to say other than go and play this game and enjoy it. Tell me about it. Tell your friends about it. I'm writing this on Sunday morning, but will likely be making the video with little time to spare before I depart to the 6th Invitational to cheer on Shopify Rebellion and Unwanted as they chase the hammer. So with that, I'll keep the outro short. I don't really know what's next, but there's certainly more to come. I have ideas, I just haven't made a decision yet. If you're here at the end, then thank you. I appreciate the love and support deeply. Until next time, this is Purple signing off. Have a wonderful night. And always remember to smile. Thanks, guys.